So you should get a notification shortly where it says webinar is now streaming live on Facebook. Guys, just a heads up, this is not a webinar today. This is just some old-fashioned live coaching. And then what I have to do is refresh this. I've got this hot tea here, but don't worry, I'm not going to drink that until I've gotten through the tech portion. This right here is the tech portion of our thing. So I don't want to boost that. I just want to share that to my regular page. Share to my timeline. Oh, it's not going to let me do that. Okay, well, I guess it's not going to let me do that. So instead, I'll just go like this. This is how I do it. I'm hacking Facebook, guys. So I go like this. I click mute. Then I copy this and I go over here to my normal page and I say, we're live today with Manoj Chugani. Come join us here. Holy crap. Okay, well, that worked. That is one heck of a link that Facebook just gave me. Hey, Facebook, shorten those links. That's my, that's not even coaching, that's just consulting. Whatever, I'm posting it. Get ready, guys, because soon I'm going to drink this beverage. Okay, I posted the big, ugly, stupid, giant link. I close that. Here I am with you guys. The focus is now here, like this. Good morning, Robin. Good to have you with us. Okay, well, let's start by drinking some of this tea. That is Pacific Sun, which is a blend of vanilla and orange black teas. That's nice, from Special Teas, who have outlasted David's tea. I learned that David's teas, I think it's David's teas as opposed to just their tea, is they are out of business. So they're closing like 82 stores in the States and all of the stores in Canada. And frankly, I don't care that much because the only place to buy tea in Victoria is at Special Teas, which is this archaic, you come in and you feel like you're in a library from the 40s. And it's two Ukrainian women, a mother and a daughter, who own the place. And there's never any music playing. It's very silent. You feel kind of like you need to make conversation when you come in there, but at the same time, it feels really awkward because your conversation sounds so loud because there's no distracting sounds. So that's the only place to buy tea for me, as far as I'm concerned. Just want to show you guys this t-shirt. That's a Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra, September 1991. So if you know what this t-shirt means, if you're cool, and if you're watching this on replay, or if you're watching this live and you know what Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra means, then let us know, because that's a bit of a, I guess we'd call that a dog whistle. It's a coded communication, this t-shirt. It calls out my people. This is actually a shirt that helps me get present to like, hey, who are my peeps and where are they? Okay, let's see. What are we talking about today? I'm going to talk a little bit about how Manoj and I met and the shared journey we've been on, in spite of being on the opposite side of the world and not talking for about 3 years, which will be kind of cool. A couple of things that I'm really present to today, and the main one is it's a bit of a dynamic that is happening in the face of, I'm trying to find my words to get into this conversation. So it's up right now in the face of the racially charged conversation, which is like, how do we help organizations get better at seeing their systemic contextual racism so that something can happen. But I really want to now take it, now that I've used that as an example, I want to take it out of, oh man, I just saw that Swiss Bistro shut down. Oh, Robin, why you tell me that? That is sad. They had good, what was it? Not schnitzel, whatever the thing was that you had to order whenever you went there. Man, that's too bad. That place was really cool. Anyhow, so this thing I'm going to talk about is especially live for us, given the context of like, oh, there's a hidden blind spot that an organization or a person or whatever has, and we want to point it out. So the way this works is, in the leadership conversation, there's this idea of like, I'm trying to develop your leadership, and then you're going to point to my racism, or you're going to point to something over there. So it's if we remove it entirely from a racial context, what happens here is where you are having your leadership developed by someone and you want to point to something you see over there in the leader. So it might be something like, hey, I noticed that you say this and you do that, right? So the leader is trying to develop your stuff by perhaps saying like, hey, I notice that you use your sense of humor as a crutch, and I really want to draw attention to that. I'm going to invite you to stop doing that. And then what would happen in this kind of thing I'm talking about is that you getting that feedback would then say, well, I notice you actually use your sense of humor as a crutch. And so I'm going to invite you to blah, 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 blah. So this is kind of the dynamic that happens if you've ever said to someone, hey, I have some feedback for you. Would you like it? And they're like, totally. Yeah, I'd love some feedback. You give them the feedback and then they're like, I've got some feedback for you. Would you like it? And you're kind of like, shit. On the one hand, I want to model receiving feedback, but on the other hand, this feels a little bit like, the defensive thrust back, because when you provide feedback, you've pierced someone a little bit, and then that's their counterpoint. So this is part of why coaching, like friends trying to coach each other, never works, because you're in the dynamic with each other. And I would see this a lot when I was developing leadership on my teams. So the organization that Manoj and I have both done work with and been through, Accomplishment Coaching, their leadership track has a group of program coaches. It has leaders in training, and then it has a junior and a senior leader, and they're developing the leadership of the people below them. So there is a degree of hierarchy inherent in that. The leader in training's job is to develop the leadership of the program coaches, and their job is to coach the participants and to have their leadership developed and take on the program. And when I was training the leadership of my leaders in training, what I noticed would happen would be they'd get caught in this dynamic. So they'd try to point to something over there with the coach for the coach to take on, and then the coach would like point back to them. The coach would be like, yeah, well, I noticed this. And what happens here is we can get caught in a position where no one can ever move forward, because you can always point to something over there on the other side. Hello, Mimi. Salam. And so this is really like, if you've ever tried to solve the problems in your romantic relationship without the help of someone externally, you've probably been in this dynamic where you're like pointing to the thing they're doing, but then they're pointing to how you're doing the opposite side of that thing. And then you're like, but that's more of your stuff. And they're like, but that's more of your stuff. And you keep doing it and you're gaslighting me. And you're like, fuck off. This is that dynamic. And so in the context of a relationship, like a romantic relationship, what do you do with that? You get support from someone outside of you, someone who's not in the swirl with you, someone who's not swimming in the same water, right? So for us to try to point to something over there in our romantic relationship, we're in it with them. So we're not really, we don't have altitude. We simply can't, almost by definition. In the context of a leadership training, it can be really challenging, because as leaders, we always want to model receiving feedback. We want to model being committed to doing our work. We want to model being a yes to receiving whatever there is. And at the same time, there has to be a degree of, I guess you could call it hierarchy. Like leadership flows in a direction. And the way I've heard this, I learned this at Accomplishment Coaching, but I think I've heard it other places too, is the idea is garbage up, gold down. People will be like, well, when you call it garbage, don't worry about that. Just let yourself be with the humor of that statement. And the idea is that I bring my garbage to the leader above me, to the person developing my leadership. I bring my resentment, I bring my judgment, I bring my frustration with the people below me, because I'm a human and they're going to trigger me, especially if I'm standing for their possibility and their breakthroughs. They're inevitably going to trigger me. If you're never getting triggered in this work, I'd be a little bit dubious and concerned. So I bring that to my leader, and my leader helps me move through that. They do that work to develop me. And then what I bring to my people below me is the gold. I bring them my best work, and they do the same thing. They bring me their garbage so that I can develop that. And then I bring them my gold. And so what's challenging about this, I promise I'm going to bring this back around to the racial conversation or the LGBTQ rights conversation or the top 1% earners conversation or the white privilege or the whatever it is in any context. I'll bring it back to that. But the challenge is that at some point, a leader has to take a stand. At some point, the leader really has to say to these people whose leadership they're developing, hey, I am really committed to hearing what you've got. And I want you to know that I'm going to listen. But once I've done that, you're going to need to trust me and be willing to trust that I've got what you've given me and that I'm going to take that work on. And that you're going to have to, if you want me to develop your leadership, you're going to have to sort of work with me as I am and be willing to submit yourself to that. Be willing to be a yes to that. Be willing to an extent, humble yourself and receive what I have. Because as long as I keep pointing to the thing you're doing, that gets me off of having to really grant you your leadership. It gets me off of having to receive what you have for me, because I can kind of reserve the right and be like, I'm not going to receive what you have until you take that on, which keeps me safe and protected, and also ensures I'm never really going to have to fully be in the vulnerability that is required to have my leadership developed. So you can probably see this is that case where pointing to something over there becomes a bit of a weapon and a shield. It becomes a bit of a device that keeps me safe from having to open up and be in the vulnerability of being exposed and of having you point to something that I can't even see, having you point out my ignorance. Hey, Bernie, long time no see, man. And so this is a little bit like what we're up against. And so first of all, at some point, the leader has to take that stand. The leader can't always sort of like, oh, got it, I see what you're pointing to. I'm going to take that on over here. And so I won't poke at you in that way until I've fully resolved that. That's like trying to be perfected in your leadership rather than being a work in progress and progressing in your work, right? Remember, that's how I hold leadership, is that we have to be progressing in our work, meaning I'm going to take what you're going to give me and I'm going to work on that with my coach. I'm going to bring that to my leaders. And I have to be willing to, yeah, hey man, it's cool to see you. I hope you're playing Magic still, and I hope you're playing Slay the Spire, because I am just obsessed with that game. That's just eating up all of my life. Anyhow, everyone else should go play Slay the Spire. Progressing in our work, meaning we are bringing our work to our leaders. We're bringing our stuff to our leaders and to our coach. We're hearing what people are bringing us and then going and doing the work, and being willing to be a work in progress. And to be a work in progress, that means that I'm willing to show up not having this fully formed. So that's kind of like the point where I say, hey, look, I really got what you're giving me. And I'm committed to you being in the experience of being gotten. So I want to hear everything you've got to say. But there's also going to be a point where you need to understand, I'm not going to have this solved today. I'm going to take this on. But if you're waiting for me to take this on before you are willing to let me develop your leadership, we're never going to move forward. So you got to sort of get that I'm a work in progress, just like you are, and I'm going to show up here and develop your leadership from the place I'm at. So we are willing to show up imperfect. We're willing to show up as a work in progress. And then from there, really be a stand for like, I'm willing to get everything you've got, but you have to understand this isn't going to get completely handled or resolved or dealt with ever. And at some point along the way, we have to be willing to accept that and then trust someone to develop our leadership. Now, I want to be clear that hopefully you can get in this, that underneath all of this is the choice to let someone develop our leadership in the face of their imperfections. That's how leadership works. So Werner Erhard would say that our leadership is granted by those who lead us and those we are leading. And what I think that means is that the people who I am leading, they have to be a yes to that. They have to get clear that they are going to trust me to point to their edge and let go of their very human righteousness about my edge. They're going to have to be like, Adam's got edges too, and I'm going to trust that he's doing his work. And I'm going to set aside, I might point to them and ask them to take a look, but then I'm going to trust that he's going to do that and just receive what he's got, even though I might feel like some of his edge is showing up in this. That's a hard thing to do. And that's where a lot of people, especially early on in leadership development, really struggle. They say things like, well, there's all manner of reasons why not do that, and they're all valid and justified. And so if we bring this back to where we started, which was this clumsy conversation about like the racial context or whatever, there is there are these sort of trump cards. So right now, a trump card would be like, this is your privilege speaking, or this is your da 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 speaking, or you're causing me violence, or, and then if we shift away a little bit from the racial context, there's other ones like, you're stepping on my trauma, you're not trauma informed, or this isn't safe. And so what is called for in these situations is, one, for I as leader to really get that, not to just knee-jerk brush that off and say, you're just resisting the leadership I have for you, but instead to really hear them and be like, okay, let's stop. I want to get you. But there's a point where let's stick with the safety one, because that's a little less charged right now. There's a point where I can just, or you can just keep insisting that you feel unsafe, and then you never really have to let me in. You never have to open up and release your safety that you're holding on to. And the nature of leadership development and transformation is it is inherently unsafe. I don't mean you're going to get punched in the side of the head. I mean that it is inherently pushing out past what you know. It's out past what's comfortable to you. And that is by definition unsafe. Safe is what you already know. So there's this funny kind of dynamic that happens where people, they're like, I'm 100% committed to a leadership. I'll get people that have like, I've done leadership development for 20 years. And then all of that smacks headfirst into a brick wall really early on, because rather than those 20 years of leadership development be kind of like, and therefore I'm willing to be vulnerable and submit and let go of everything I know, that actually becomes the reason that they don't. The reason they're like, everything you're doing is wrong, and I've got all this background, and here's how you should be developing my leadership, which is kind of like pointing out the leader's edge and holding them stuck. So just to be clear, this conversation really is encompassing both sides of the table, right? The work is always on this side. And as a leader, there is a time when we have to really get what people are in. We have to really hear their objection, be willing to listen to what they're pointing to. And then there's a point where we have to say, now, are you willing to trust me in that? And are you still a yes to me developing your leadership, knowing that that edge may or may not be there? And if they're a no, great, we don't have any more work to do, right? If someone's a no to developing their leadership, your job's to be like, cool, where do we go from here? You know, if this team is about us deepening as leaders, and if you don't want that, then it seems like maybe this isn't the place for you to be. Nothing wrong with that. That's totally fine. And there we are. Okay, well, I don't know how clear that was. It sounded a little bumpy as I was speaking it, but it felt good. So I think I'll stick with that. Now let's just see if I see someone's mentioned me in a comment. And so this is the part of these live shows where I just check my Facebook comments. Maybe I'll check my likes. I'm not going to do that. Let me tell you a little bit about Manoj, and then I'm going to get him to take his mic and his camera, put them on. But first, Manoj he's going to tell us, I think he's in Singapore or some way. It's about 1 a.m. where he is. So first of all, just let that sink in, right? If you think, man, this seems edgy to be in a conversation like this live, imagine doing it at 1 a.m. your time. That sounds horrible. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And Manoj and I met at a event put on by Rich Litvin, who I used to do a lot of work with and for. And we started talking because he was a coach and he was looking for what was next. And I was very clear, like, hey, you know, if you really want to take on transformation, if you really want to go deep, there's only one program you should consider. Never mind anything else. It's accomplishment coaching. I get nothing out of putting you in that program. I don't get a toaster. I don't get a reward other than one more coach in this world getting really deep, profound training and deepening themselves and creating their spirit and blah, 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 blah. And so he and I talked a little bit. I put him in touch with someone else, Bay's former coach. And for him, I think he's in Hong Kong. And so to be in this program, he's going to tell us a little bit about it, but like meant flying from Hong Kong all the way to San Diego and then back and doing that every month. So I think it'll be more cool to hear you share a little bit about that, Manoj. So let's get your camera on, let's get your mic on, and you can tell us a bit about that before we dive in together. Hello.
Hi.
How was that? How was it waiting for your turn?
Well, I think there's no coincidences because whatever you spoke about leadership, I like this thing about, I think you mentioned that like leadership flows in one direction. It's like a garbage up and gold down, and me getting triggered. So I think it really resonates with what I wanted to speak about. So yeah, so it was cool. Thank you.
Cool. I love it. So just share briefly, like, what was it like getting yourself enrolled, meaning like getting yourself to a yes for that training, and what were you saying yes to in terms of the travel and all of that?
Yeah, so for me, my journey working with a coach started way back in 2008. I did a program with Robin Sharma, and it was in Canada. That was my first time there, and it made a very big impact on me. And as soon as I came back, because of what was spoken out there, all the top CEOs and the top athletes have a coach. So I came back and I started working with the coach. It was the best decision because at that time I had an office in Shenzhen, in Hong Kong, in Spain, and France.
Cool.
And I was really struggling to manage all those different like offices. And it was a good decision because within 6 months I was able to work from home. My kids were very young. My daughter was born that year, so I was able to spend time with them. I was able to work from home. I in shorts, t-shirt, and a pair of flip-flops. I know it's the new norm now, but at that time it was not. So I was able to do that in a few months. So from that point of view, working with the coach was a good decision, but it was also bad timing because this is when we had the financial crisis.
Yes.
And that had a big impact on me. If it wasn't for my coach, I probably would not be married to the same person. I mean, my wife has been an incredible support for me, but it was my coach out there who really kept me sane. I still have a smaller version of the same business. I was able to save that. I still live off that, just that's still there. And that whole journey about what a coach did for me inspired me to become a coach. So at that time, I was looking at business coaching. I became a business coach in 2013. I had access to all the tools and the systems and all that, but I still felt there was something missing. And this is working with my own coach. I then got present to like the ICF and leadership coaching, and I saw that there was something missing in my practice. Just having the tools and the systems working as a business coach, there was something else missing.
Mm.
I think it was through Mind Valley, I discovered Litwin.
Yeah.
And I mean, for me, he's probably one of the best coaches that I've seen in this world. And that's how I think one of the first videos I watched was of you and Bay being coached out there. And that was very inspiring. I said, man, I would never be able to do this with my wife in the same call. It was very confrontational, very edgy. And yeah, so then I just got curious about this. I made it a point to be at his intensive. I came out there. That's when I met you. I spoke to you. I said, I have to speak to you because how the hell did you agree to do that call? And then I just found out that was very normal. And that's when you recommended AC, accomplishment coaching.
Yeah.
And I didn't ask too many questions, or like I just did very superficial due diligence. My wife is doing the program now in September. When she asked me, I mean, did you fill up all the questions? I said, no, I just put my credit card. I just put whatever was there. I just signed in because I was a hell yes.
Mm.
And it was life changing because the only regret I have was I didn't give it 100% because I have another business. I always got too many things to do at the same time, which is what I want to speak to you about.
Of
So I
course.
didn't give it as much as I could. So I still got a lot out of it. So I would actually look forward to flying out there. And it's no fun traveling economy with pressurized tube
Yes.
and dealing with the jet lag. I would be on 3 or 4 hours of sleep, but I did my yoga and my meditation, whatever I could just to keep awake, try keeping away from the tea and the caffeine. I didn't
Can I
blink
ask you
on
a
those
question or
slides.
two?
Yeah, sure, sure.
So were you going every month? Were you traveling, or
Uh,
did you do their program that was like 4 times over the course of the year?
no, it was still 8 trips, but it was every
Eight
second
trips.
month. It was still
Okay,
every
so
second month.
8 trips. I imagine that wasn't just like there must have been something you saw for yourself to say yes to that, as opposed to like, hey, there's this online course. So like, what was it that you saw or got present to? Like, what inspired you to be a yes to that?
It's what you told me, what I saw. I mean, it was just a leap of faith because I'd
Mm.
watched Rich Litwin coaching you guys, and I said I want to coach like him or coach like you guys. And the moment you told me, and I think somebody else you pointed me, I spoke to Bay as well, and then I think you introduced me. I remember her name, Dawn, was
Hallie,
it? No,
was it? Who
she
was it?
was. Dawn was at Litwin's Intensive, and then Hallie was the one who like
Yes,
enrolled
Dawn
me.
Armstrong.
Yeah, so I spoke to Dawn out there, so she was the final push. And when I spoke to like Hallie, it was okay, let's go through the motions. The decision was made. And I think just before doing that, you had challenged me. I mean, you were kind enough to give me two calls. We had one in like October and one by when you're going to sign up. So I stuck to that commitment. As soon as I finished talking to you, I reached out to her, put my credit card down. I said, okay, here I come. And that's
Uh-huh.
it. It was just a leap of faith. And do I have any regrets? Absolutely not. If I have any regrets, I didn't continue on the mentor coaching program because what I got present to was I see myself as a business coach with ontological skills. So I decided because, in fact, Christopher, the CEO of the AC, challenged me. He goes, you're just skimming of rock to rock to rock. I said, you may see it that way, but I've been a business coach for 7 years. That's what I want to work on. This is an extra skill that's going to help me work with the leadership teams that I coach.
Yep.
But I am primarily a business coach. So I've been working on that. And yeah, so that's where I am today.
Ah, cool. So a business coach with ontological skills.
That's my goal. Yeah. So
Nice.
I would like to keep working on my ontological practice. I haven't done much of that in the last 1 year because I've like upgraded my skills as a business coach. And that's the next chapter of my life right now. Yeah.
Cool. You, Manoj, often are sort of like a bit of an inspiration for me when I'm, part of our job as coaches is to uh, be in a conversation with people that like gets them present to what's possible in their lives if they were not stopped by everything that stops us. And that's not like, oh, this person's busted, therefore. It's like everyone is stopped by whatever stops them, right? We all have our context, our blind spots. And you're often an inspiration for me in those conversations with people because people, of course, will be like, I live in Canada and coming down to the States one weekend every month. I'm like, let me tell you about a man I know named Manoj, who from 4 conversations said yes to this. Can I put you in touch with him? Or can I share his story with you or something like that? So it's a beautiful model for what it takes to say yes to possibility. Because like I'm sure there was just a million good reasons not to do that, to not choose that. And yet there you did because you saw something impossible. So super cool. Let's dive in. Like, what are we going to talk about here? What's going to be the conversation that someone watches you in and then comes to you a year from now and be like, how did you do that? And how do I coach like you do? And
Yeah. So one of my biggest takeaways from doing the Litwin Intensive in London in 2017 when you were there, I
mm,
really got present to. I said my purpose is to let go of my smallness and own my greatness and inspire others to do the same. And actually, this is where I am because the coaching program I did in 2019 was in service of working with larger businesses. And what's happening right now is I still feel my smallness is getting in the way. I still seem to be attracting a lot of prospects and leads from the smaller businesses.
mm,
And I'm okay with that. But what's happening here is I can see how it's getting in my way, wherein I know with AC, I mean, when I say AC, I mean like accomplishment coaching. So, um, what was very, very clear is that we are not supposed to show up as experts. But in business coaching, at least the methodology that I'm certified on, there is a certain level of competence and expertise in that. So what
right.
happens is when I'm coaching or when I'm speaking to prospects from a smaller business, uh, how the smallness and bigness it shows up. It's, I mean, how it shows up, there's a bit of arrogance on my part right now, where I kind of call them small. So, I mean, there's a certain comfort level. So there's that hierarchy, which I don't want to be coaching from, but I've noticed I'm coaching from.
Hmm.
So when I'm working with them, I kind of create that hierarchy in my conversations. And on the flip side of it, the segments that I want to work with are the larger businesses. I feel very, very small when I'm speaking to them. So when I'm speaking to them, it's like the opposite of that. I show up as inconfident, a bit nervous, a bit clumsy,
These are
and
the big people, right?
the bigger clients that I would like to work with. So I'm just very curious about that. What the hell is happening? And it's so automatic that I want to know what's underneath that. And so this is one aspect. I'll just bring in another aspect. Maybe they're related, maybe they're not. You can help me distinguish it. Then maybe we can just work on one if you don't have the time. It's also this thing about asking for money, because what's happening is obviously in service of my goals, my own, I am looking to grow as a coach, make a bigger impact. And the reason I've chosen bigger clients is because I want to work with businesses that are making a difference in this world. The way the world is today, it's only the entrepreneurs who are going to step up and solve problems. If I can empower them to step out of the smallness, own their greatness, and magnify that impact through their businesses, it's what I'm going to do and be rewarded for that. So this really is the like underlying purpose. But that smallness is showing up because I'm still asking for money as I would smaller clients. So that hierarchy is showing up out there as well. And just something that happened recently where I have this, I mean, I have a context, I mean, at least in my reality, when I get leads and prospects from India, there's always that tussle where pricing is concerned. My context is it's the dollar to rupee conversion. We always like it always goes in a tailspin there. So just recently, because of the pandemic and how appalling the situation is for the daily wage earners, for the migrants, for the migrant workers, I said, wait a minute, if these small businesses cannot pay what I'm asking for, and if I want to contribute, what would a win-win look like? So I'm in a conversation right now with some people to create a group coaching program where they pay something as little as maybe 300 US or less a month for a program that we would charge 1,500 or 2,500 US a month. It's a 10-month coaching program. I'm willing to do this for free. They pay this, and this entire amount is will be donated to a nonprofit that I volunteer for. And those conversations have gone very smooth. There's been enrollment because I got my mentor, my coach to say, okay, I won't charge you for the IP on this. I'm there, I'm in, I will support you with this, no charge at all.
Can I
I
pause you
spoke
for a
to two.
sec, Manoj?
Sure.
What's important about what you're telling me?
What's important is when it's not about me, when I'm focusing on the difference I want to make, it's effortless, there's flow, there's connection, there's enrollment. In all the previous conversations, I know I'm making it about me. I'm making it about how am I doing, about my worth and all that. So I'm present to that. But this was a new discovery for me because those conversations have been effortless when it's a contribution.
Can I pause you again?
Sure.
So what was important about what you were telling me?
Okay. What is important about what I was telling you? Yeah. So I'm not focusing on myself. When I'm when I'm connected to my purpose, I'm willing to make a difference. I'm okay to enroll others. I'm not there in the picture. There's no focus on me. It's just about focusing on the client, the difference it can make for them, and the difference I can make for the nonprofit. I'm just a conduit. Means the spotlight's not on me.
Okay. And why is that important? And not like, I'm not asking that question like, so what, but more like, I'm really curious. What about that is important?
What about that is important because there was no smallness or bigness, nothing on that coming up. My stops were not there because what's stopping me is the money conversation, feeling big or small when I'm speaking to a prospect when it's about me and the client. But in this case, it's not about me. It's about the client, how I can help them. and how I can contribute to the nonprofit. And it will probably be the biggest, for me, in my interesting choice of words, in my small world, this would be one of the biggest contributions that I made.
It was nice to see that smile come on your face. I enjoyed that. So I heard a couple of things, but I want to check in with you. It sounds like, well, actually, what would you love to leave here with?
And just some clarity on how can I play a bigger game? How can I want to raise the bar. I want to make a bigger difference.
Okay.
Yeah. So clarity on that and just getting present to the automatic stops when they show up. So what do I do?
Got it. Let me speak to everyone else for a sec and just say, like, so with Manoj, what I'm really present to already is that this is a man who's brilliant and can see a great deal, which is awesome until it's a problem. And just in that conversation, at least for me, and you might check in with yourself and ask, like, how much of that was I following along with? And there became this point where I was like, why are we talking about this? Like, what am I listening to? Not from like this is wrong or I'm bored and therefore we should talk about something different, but more like I kind of just got lost in all of the conversation. And so that's where that question of like, what's important about this stemmed from. And it's worth noting that we don't really have anywhere we're going to yet. We're still at the point where we're setting like, what is our destination? And so what's next is to start to get clear on that. Like, what does a bigger game look like for Manoj? Then we can start to like, that'll allow us to pare away a little bit of the conversation and focus on what matters. So to bring that back to you, Manoj, like what does playing a bigger game look like? Like I get the sense of it, the concept, bigger game, but like if you made that real for me and brought that into something concrete, what would that look like?
Yeah. So what I'm getting present to is if I was working with my ideal client would be somebody who is very clear on what he or she wants to do. Their business is making a difference. And I'm working with clients like that who are making it, who are a contribution to this world. For me, it's like, how do I empower businesses to realize their vision for a better world? So for me, it would be businesses where uh, there's clear connection to purpose, clear connection to team. And these are businesses that could be in the range of 10, 50, 100, 200 million. It could be the teams of 10, 50, 200, 300 people as well. And it's led by a leadership team that's humble. It's really about using the business as a way of making a difference. So yeah, if I was coaching about 15 or 20 of those kind of businesses, I would have group coaching programs. Some of them would be a contribution in India, Africa. I don't know. I haven't decided that yet.
Okay,
But
let me
yeah,
pause you.
Okay. So.
No, you're doing perfect. You're doing perfect. I'm really appreciating you. What do you notice about your answer to that question? Do you remember the question, first of all?
What would that look like?
Yeah, and great. And what do you notice about your answer to that question?
I started talking about what my practice would look like.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, fill me in.
Cool. There's stuff I notice. I just wanted to see if like what you could sort of create some altitude and see like, oh, so I notice it's kind of like very sprawling. I don't know if you've ever like here in the west coast of Canada, we have a city called Vancouver, and some of the suburbs are very sprawling. They're just like all over the place. There's like no rhyme or reason. You're like, what was even the intention of this? It just seems like the city kind of like kudzu just grew out. That's what I noticed about your answer. I'm like, okay, wow, there's like 50, maybe 200, maybe 400 people. There's maybe doing this. They're in India or maybe Africa or maybe all over the place. There's like, it's like, what is the concrete thing? Like if we were able to have you play a bigger game by the end of this conversation, what are you doing? And it's like everything. which would be a bigger game for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So before we go to trying to like change that, I want to invite you to just check in and be with that. Like how is that for you? Like, like seeing that, how is that?
Yeah, it's confronting. It's confronting because I can see how my fears, my insecurities are wanting me to hold on to the past, which is why I keep creating. I'm still in, okay, I'm still playing safe because going for what I want would mean choosing.
Ah,
And this is a pattern for me because I want everything. And then in the end, what happens is it turns out to be scattered focus. And scattered focus then turns out to be being very busy.
yeah.
It's activity and not productivity because choosing is scary.
I've noticed that I can relate to a lot of this. It's not an unfamiliar place for me to be. And what I saw in my own life was that choosing everything is choosing nothing. It's the same. There is no choice. When we choose everything, you haven't chosen something. So we could zero into that. We could have a coaching conversation just about your relationship to choice and all of that stuff. Or we could just have you practice choosing something in the moment and then work on, the thing that drives up. Because I heard kind of like where we started this conversation was that there's this relationship between someone being smaller than you or bigger than you. I'm more competent or I'm less competent, like top dog, bottom dog, whatever. And it sounds like that's in the way of creating the next bigger client.
Mm-hmm.
But now we've got this other path, which is like, oh, just this struggle, this challenge, this fear or resistance to just choosing any one thing. So you've kind of got two directions we could go in.
Yeah.
Which do you feel called to move towards?
Yeah, I think it's connected because, as I said, I'm transitioning into the larger clients. I have a few of them. I don't have
Okay.
enough of them. I have more of the smaller clients.
Okay.
And it's reasonable because 6, 7 years I've been invested in working with the smaller businesses. So that momentum is generating those leads which keep coming to me from the smaller businesses. There's not been enough effort put in working on the larger businesses. And as a result, what happens is I then complain that I get more of the smaller clients because I haven't really made that intentional choice that this is who I am. I mean, as coaches, we work with clients and we tell them, what is your sandbox? I'm not choosing a sandbox. I want this and that.
Well, so what do you
So,
want?
yeah, so what would success for me look like? What success would for me would look like is I would be coaching 10 to 15. I don't even want to go to 20 because this is a lifestyle choice. 10 to 15 mid-sized businesses. What is a mid-sized business? A mid-sized business is like a leadership team of 10. I mean, like the leadership team could be 5 to 15 people. That's fine, but it could be a business that's got about 20 people up to 200, 300 people. So this is also a mid-sized business. What do I mean by a mid-sized business? It's not small. It's not the large Fortune 500 businesses. It's in the middle
It's
because I
mid-size.
know,
What do I
yeah,
mean
I
by
know you're
mid-size
going to,
business? It's mid-size.
no. So basically, yeah, it's okay.
Can I invite
They,
you to slow down for a sec?
sure.
Take a breath. I notice that there's just like a lot, like it feels over here like your mind is just like, and then what do I mean by that? And then there's more conversation. Is that how it occurs for you?
Yeah, I'm most present when I'm speaking slowly. And obviously, when there's a lot of conversation, I'm not present. I'm just in my context and my thoughts. Yeah. So okay.
Well, that sounded kind of like from your head, like you were maybe taking what I'd said and put it into your brain and thought about it from a brainy place. I'm asking more like just this conversation we're in right now. How does it feel to you? What's your experience of being in this conversation right now? Your lived in this moment experience.
Okay. Uh, it feels very familiar,
Okay.
but it's also very confronting to admit it on a live call like this.
So it feels familiar. What
Yeah.
else is your experience?
Yeah. My experience is this happens to me when I kind of feel caught out because honestly, it's once again coming back to what we distinguish the
Okay, do I
fear
have
to make
your
a
permission
choice.
to keep interrupting you?
Sure.
I know it's a little annoying and I get that, I keep getting caught out. So let me speak to everyone else first. Part of what happens in coaching is we're looking at like, what does someone want in their life and how do we move them towards that in their life? But the other thing that can happen is that the way they show up in their life starts to show up in the coaching conversation. And so what we're really doing is reflecting how someone's being in the moment. And so that's what I'm doing with Manoj is I notice a lot of this conversation is kind of just a dialogue with his brain, which as we can all tell, hopefully you can tell, like it is brilliant in there, but it's like a morass. There's like threads and this goes to that, goes to that, goes to that. And we could lose ourselves in it forever. And I noticed that that conversation doesn't seem to be moving us anywhere. And so we're kind of like dropping down into one more layer and taking a look like, hey, just what is your experience right now? And this is for you to listen to as well, Manoj. You probably haven't heard that other stuff because I was talking to them. But when I asked him what his experience was, he described that it was familiar. And then he started to talk about how he felt about that. But he wasn't actually describing the experience itself. So it's like if I said to you, Manoj, if you asked me like, what's my experience? And my experience was I feel exhausted, tired. I'm not saying this is how you feel, but just that's the experience I have. But I'm like, my experience is I don't like feeling this way and I blah, 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 blah. And I often notice I've felt that way in the past, which is less speaking to my experience in the moment and more speaking to how I feel about the experience I'm having. Can you get that distinction? I can explain it a little better if you need me to.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you a question before your brain is like, got it, let's put this in the brilliant calculator. So just check in with yourself. Like we've been talking for maybe a half hour or so. What is the experience you've had so far? Not how do you feel about it, not in the past this, or I often know this means that, but just like, what is the experience I'm having in this moment?
Yeah. So it's draining. Like I said,
Nice.
firstly, it's a familiar and it's draining. It's
Uh-huh.
justification. And it's also
Yeah.
it's a classic cop out that keeps me from actually making the choices I need to because
Let me
choosing
pause
is
you
fearful. Yeah.
because it just happened. Did you guys catch that? A classic cop out is not an experience. A classic cop out is an evaluation of what I'm currently experiencing. It's an analysis of what I'm doing. I am doing this because it allows me to cop out.
Mm.
Do you notice that, Manoj? Right? So it's just all we're trying to do right now is separate your lived experience in the moment from your brain's story about it. And I don't even know where that's going to lead us, but I do know that's going to allow us to be situated where we are a little bit more. And then we can start to take the next foot forward.
Right.
So you got some judgment about this, right? Oh, the experience I have is I'm feeling a bit drained. I'm feeling like I'm justifying a lot of stuff. Can you plug in? Is there any other sort of experience in this conversation that's showing up for you?
Yeah. My head just feels blank and making decisions or moving forward in this. I mean, like I said, it feels very familiar. And when I'm in the situation where my head just goes blank, I then kind of freeze. I don't take action.
Right. So that's like a prediction or something out of the past, right?
Yeah.
When I'm
I
here,
mean,
this is what happens.
yeah.
Got it. So let me check in. Over here, my experience is a little bit of confusion, a little bit of fear, a little bit of concern, like, is this conversation making sense to anyone else? Is this going to make me look, I've got some of my own performance in the space I can feel. I'm present to that. a little bit, my experience is I have like a half smile that's present in my being that's kind of like just enjoying both being in this with you and watching sort of, it's almost like I'm watching you get like, hey, get out of that little hamster wheel. And you're like, oh yeah, totally. And you get right back in, you're like, ha, I'm like, oh, hold on, let's. So I'm present to that. And I'm present to part of my experience is a desire to get onto that wheel with you and the energy it's requiring of me to keep not doing that. So that's my experience in this moment. Me having shared that, are you present to anything else in your current lived in experience?
I'm just feeling, yeah. So in my previous coaching conversations, so spinning is something I do all the time. So I think that's what's happening now with like being the hamster on that. Yeah. So I guess what happens is I get lost in analyzing or like analyzing a bit too much. So that's what's like happening out here. What else is happening? No, I think that's it. And having articulated what's happening, kind of my headspace has cleared up.
Okay. What do you think all of that is about?
Well, from the coach training, it is a way to keep me safe. That's what, but then again, this is my head, this is for my like head talking. What I feel this is it's a way of keeping me stuck. And then I complain about being stuck. But this is just a way of keeping me stuck so I stay safe and I don't take the action.
Got it. So what I heard you say, first of all, I just really acknowledge you and I love that you kind of caught yourself like, oh, in my training program, I know that. And like, oh, that's totally from my head, right? It's like when someone's like, I'm doing something from my fear and they're like, why do you think you're doing that? And I'm like, well, in this textbook from Freud, it clearly means that. And it's like, there's none of me in that. That's like way up in the stands, like, you know. So it's interesting, right? In this conversation we're having, we're kind of asking like, what do you really want? What do you want to create? And what's showing up is like a lot of analysis, a lot of justifying, a lot of explanation, feeling drained, and then feeling kind of blank.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that is designed? Like if all of that was somehow created or like put together at some point, what do you think all of that is designed to protect you from in this conversation?
Yeah. So before I answer that question, can I just tell you what came up for me before you asked that question?
Please. Yeah.
So what came up for me is again a familiar place where I've come to in my calls with Christopher. This has come up before as well, because what has happened in this conversation, it's like a kind of a cloud has lifted. I can see my shenanigans have kind of disappeared. And actually, what I need to do is plain and simple. I have defined who my ideal client is. I have an action plan. I just need to go out and do it. So the lack of a plan or not knowing what to do is not the challenge. Where I see I get caught in is, like I said, this fogginess that comes in my head, which is to answer your question, what is it protecting me from? This fogginess when it comes in my head, it is protecting me from taking that step, because taking that step would mean like being on this call, being seen, being vulnerable, and
So what
putting
is
my
the
ass.
step?
What is the step? Just go out there and do it. I mean, I'll give you
Do
an
what?
example. Okay. Just go out. Okay. Last year, I got an opportunity to speak to a group of
Can I
31
pause you?
entrepreneurs. Yeah.
I'm going to let you say anything you want. I just want to check and make sure you're answering the question, which is what is the step for you to do now,
Yeah.
as opposed to what is an example of something that happened in the past that might, like, those are totally distinct. They sound
Right.
similar, but when
Got
we
it.
talk about the past, it's like that's not really about what there is for you to do from here to move forward today.
Got
So
it.
I just want to make sure you're answering that question.
Yeah. What is the step I need to do is I've worked a plan out with my coach. I need to work the plan. That's it. I
Okay.
just need to take, I
And
mean,
so
one
what
is
is the
being
step?
seen. Okay. What is the step? Uh, I just need to keep, I mean, my commitment is to reach out to the organizations where I can find my ideal client. get in there, have the conversations, do the webinars and do the presentations. That's it.
So what is the next step? You're doing fine, by the way. I just
Okay.
noticed, right? Like, and for everyone else, right? Like Manoj is doing perfect. He's doing amazing in this conversation because we're getting him from every single side. He's like, all right, I think you got me again. And it's just, sometimes this is what it is to be a coach, is just to keep asking the question until the answer is there. So yeah, what is the step? I heard like a bunch of things that there are to do inside of a plan.
Okay.
But the next
So
step.
a very simple plan is I'm in a conversation with one business owner every day and just discussing, just sharing with him what I do, with him or her what I do, and with the intention of asking them about speaking engagements or prospects who might be interested in coaching. That's it. Just a simple step at the moment.
Got
And
it.
I've been doing it the whole of this week very effectively.
How's it going?
It's going very well.
Okay. So is there anything more to actually like have you playing big, so to speak, or is you taking those steps, you're already there?
For now, I'm there. And where this thing about big or small, I guess it's just a question of managing in the moment when it shows up. And also maybe, as we were taught at AC, maybe do a clearing before I get into situations where I feel I may be triggered. And where I'm triggered, just reflect on that and take that to my coach.
Okay, so what I'm curious, like what had you bring I need to play bigger and let go of smallness when it sounds like you sound like I'm already in action. You know, now that we've gotten through all the smoke, you're already in action and you're doing everything that there is to take. So like what had that be the request you brought to
Yeah.
the conversation?
Yeah, because my survival mechanism, I don't know how you would distinguish it for your like audience. Whatever I do for my survival mechanism, it's never good enough. To put it in perspective, in January, I had
Nope,
tripled.
don't put it in perspective.
No, okay. Uh,
And
okay.
actually, Manoj,
It's not good
if I
enough. Yeah.
may, let me
Yeah.
pause you for a sec. So I'm going to speak again to the audience, which is like, there's a funny thing that happens in the coaching profession, which is I think a foundation of this work is coaches should work with coaches. We got to do more of our work than anyone else. And so one of the other things that couples with that is there's a lot of needy, desperate coaches because it's hard to build a business and we don't really know how to do that and blah, blah, blah. And so these people get into the industry and after 1 year, they're like, I'm going to be a coach's coach. And they decide to coach these people who are desperate and needy. And what they don't understand is coaches are the worst clients. This is not about you, Manoj, I promise. And I include myself in this, we're sophisticated and we have fancy language to talk about this stuff. And our ego has grabbed all of our training and is now, it's like why a lawyer does not get put on juries. As a lawyer, as a member of the bar, I cannot be selected for a jury because I messed that whole process right up. And that's what coaches do when they're being coached is we're like, oh, from my survival mechanism, because of my training, ergo the money conversation. And it's just like, stop all that. Because what it does is we're kind of coaching ourselves, which is really putting our fingers in the machinery. So it's just a little bit of what we've got going on here. And so Manoj, I really am curious, like if you set aside everything you knew, all of your training, and we're just like, hey, what had me bring, from an honest place? What had me bring that like, I want to let go of my smallness? What had that be the thing that was there for you to bring, given that you're in action and you're doing this stuff?
Yeah, because I noticed it. I was on a call with four other entrepreneurs, and these were very large businesses. I felt small in that conversation, and I was a coach. So this was a I was I mean this was a group coaching opportunity I put my hand up for, and I just felt that I didn't do as well, and one of my conclusions was it was how I showed up. And
Got it. So let's shall we look at that for about 10 minutes before we wind down?
sure.
Great. If there's anyone watching who's like, man, this should have gone this way, or this is the way I thought it would, this is kind of how coaching can be, is that like there's a trend we have to keep our eye on, but in the moment, you're like all over the map. You're doing your best. So this coaching request kind of got triggered because you were in a group with 4 other entrepreneurs and you felt you showed up in a way that was kind of small. There was something, a different way you'd like to show up. So if you were to show up a little more like aligned with how you want to show up, what would have been different? What would we have noticed?
Yeah, so when I have put my hand up for a similar program, there were smaller businesses, and there I showed up more confident.
Yeah,
So I don't
these were
know,
bigger
because
businesses.
these were bigger businesses, so I made myself small. So I felt there was less connection. Because I felt there was less connection, I started analyzing, I started beating myself up. So probably, I don't know if I showed up small, but I felt small.
So what
And
do you
how would I have
do?
liked to show up? Sorry.
Sure, that's okay.
How I would have liked to show up is no hierarchy, just meet the person where they are, and just be there in service of the person.
So what shows up when it sounds like there's this ranking happens inside your big, beautiful brain, which is like the moment someone shows up in front of you, it's either like they're smaller than me or they're bigger than me. Or there's like that Goldilocks person that's just right on par with you, but they're only going to be able to stay there for us. You know, you're keeping score constantly, and eventually one of you will have hierarchy over the other one.
Yeah, so this is where it gets a bit tricky and goes down a slippery slope, because the moment I see the person is not as smart as I thought, I then
Right.
like elevate myself in my mind. And this is what I don't like, because as a coach, this is
Okay, I
not
want to
how I
pause
want
you.
to
I
be.
want to pause you.
Okay.
We don't want to go into why you don't like it.
All
You're
right.
doing great.
Okay.
You're doing great. How am I doing intellectually over here?
Fine. I like grateful for this. I'm feeling very vulnerable on this, but I put my hand up for this. Yeah.
You're doing awesome. Okay, so there's this ranking. You're like the Jason Bourne of who's smarter, who's bigger, who's better. Whatever the labeling is, there's like I can see that person. They're here, they're there, they're there. These people I have something I can give to. The people that are bigger. So what is the story that plays out once you realize they're above you? What's the conversation? And try to keep it succinct if you can.
Am I good enough? That's it.
And I'm guessing I'm not good enough.
I'm not good enough. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
And how do you determine not being good enough? I'm guessing it's not like, do I give my kids enough presents at Christmas relative to them? I'm guessing there's some other measure of being good enough. So what is that?
Yeah. So when I actually, how do I measure it? I just analyze and come to a conclusion. I make an assumption.
Yes, and there's many, many, many different ways that we can make that conclusion. Like I can be like, I'm fitter than them, therefore I'm better than them. But I'm guessing that's not your calculus. So is it like, oh, I'm not good enough because I've not made as much money? Or is it I'm not good enough because they have more people? Or I'm not good enough? What is the measure you're using to determine good enough?
I mean, the difference between the previous group and this group, the previous group were all women. This is all men.
Okay.
So I don't know whether it's a man thing because mine is bigger than yours shows up. So maybe that's there. So that could be a financial thing or a knowledge thing. So obviously I'm not going down the financial path here, but it was more a knowledge thing. So the question was, wow, this is not good, but it's coming up, I'm going to say.
Yep.
Did I flaunt how much I know to show I'm good enough?
So it sounds like the calculus used to determine if you're good enough is money and knowledge.
Or it could be or, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, great. So it's good to see this, right? Because not good enough is, well, the more we can nuance and see, we can start to push, we don't have to put our focus on certain things. So not good enough is like the broadest, right? It's kind of like, is that person better or worse than me? If better, then this, if worse than that. But now we're getting a little closer, like, oh, got it. Money or smarts, money or knowledge. So what happens once you've decided and let's go even closer. Was it money or smarts with these people, these 4 people?
Yeah. So for me, what's coming up is I won't feel as valued if I'm not, yeah, if I don't, yeah. So basically, it's a money thing. I won't
Great.
feel as valued if I'm not in the same network.
Perfect. And what do you do? So now we've gotten a little more clear. You're around these people and the calculus happening is like, and it's not that it always happens this way, but at least in these situations, oh, they're better with money, they've got more money, they're better at making it, whatever.
It's an assumption. So, I mean, I don't know these
A
people
hundred
very well.
percent,
Yeah. Yeah.
100%. But so is everything, right? And like we're always operating with these assumptions, and that was what you felt. So from that assumption, they're better than me because more money. What did you then do? What's the compensatory mechanism that shows up?
Yeah. So for me, it is then to use knowledge because yeah, then I use that as my shield, as my,
Great.
yeah. And when I don't get an opportunity to display that, I kind of feel vulnerable and I feel diminished.
Great. So it's like you might have more money than me, but let me tell you and
Um,
demonstrate how smart I am as a balancing off. Okay, great. And what are the ways that you ensure that gets communicated? How do you make sure they get that you are this knowledgeable guy?
by doing exactly what we're not supposed to be, I mean, show up as an expert or a consultant, which we're not supposed to do that much.
Okay, hold on, because you're about to editorialize yourself, right?
Yeah.
So show up as an expert. What are some of the ways you show up as an expert? If we just let this be totally perfect, as opposed to
Yeah.
like what you should and shouldn't do and what I've been trained and blah, blah, blah.
I mean, do more of the talking
Okay, do more of the
instead of
talking.
asking the questions.
Uh-huh.
And maybe they were just reserved. Why see their silence as them judging me? So I just feel that, yeah, I make it about me, not make it about them. So I'm all the time making assumptions on how I'm being judged rather than being in the moment and being of service.
Okay, so you just went down the path of like what you should and shouldn't be doing or the right way to do this. So I'm going to bring you right back here to where we're looking at, which is I'm going to invite you to, as a practice outside of this conversation, there's so much, man, I honor your heart and your dedication to like your work, Manoj, because it's really like, I can really get it's hard for you to just let yourself be exactly where you are because you're like, but I should be doing this. And then I should also be like not judging people. And I know that I'm not meant, and there's like all of what you should be doing. And it comes from like this beautiful, good place where you want to be of service. But I notice it just has you like 5 steps down the road, no matter how well intentioned that is, it keeps you from being where you are. Do you get that before I say more? Yeah. So I'm really going to invite you to notice that happening. And like instead of what you should, I know that, of course, you know it. You know a great deal, more than most people. And as soon as you notice what you know you should be doing, I'm going to invite you to instead let go of that and practice being where you are. So where you are is intimidated by the amount of money these people have made. And from there, trying to compensate by expressing and demonstrating a whole lot of knowledge. For starters, I would just suggest even sitting with that. Like, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. Probably works in some places. So from that, totally understandable, makes all the sense in the world. We've got show up as an expert, do more of the talking, any other stuff that you can see you'll do when that dynamic is present for you.
Yeah, when I'm uncomfortable, then I go out of my way for them to like me.
How do you make them like you?
I want them to, yeah, I mean, in the senses like try and use humor.
I love your sense of humor.
Yeah, but I
Okay.
can see it's not funny. It's not serving me here because, yeah.
See, you're doing it right
So,
there. Did you catch that? I'm doing it wrong. Instead of
yeah,
like, right, why do I have headaches? Oh, it's because I keep punching
yeah,
myself in the head. So great, use humor. That's a good one. I'm well acquainted with that approach? Anything
Yeah, so
else you can
then,
see?
no, so clearly I am, I mean, it's not authentic
That now we're getting into the
because,
editorializing, right?
right, yeah.
So rather than what it
What
is
do
or
I
is
do?
not, yeah, what do you do?
Yes. So what do I do? I mean, I tend to use humor. Please like me, and I think that's it. I mean, I don't, I, and I think it's not, and I find reasons to again find ways to add value by I have this tool, I have that tool, I know this. What about this? So that what I would equate to that peacock dance.
Got it. So provide a bunch of value and, give them a ton of tools.
Yeah.
So a couple things, and I want to create some practices with you before we wind down. Can you see, so like this makes sense, first of all, can you see how this makes a lot of sense? Like if the way things are set up, not how they should be, but just like the truth of the world, at least currently, is some are better, some are worse. When you're around the people that are better, what there is for you to do is to like prove how you're equal with them. And one of the ways you do that is to like give them tools, demonstrate knowledge. And can you see how like the way you described business coaching at the start of this conversation is a perfect fit for that? Right? It's like, oh, what there is to do is not be with them, is to give them a bunch of tools and expertise, which then like, I get to be on par with them. I've got something to contribute. Great. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is that the experience you are having with them of being less than, imagine if that was the same experience everyone else around these people in their lives was having. So imagine that's not just you. And I'm not saying this is even true. Let's imagine that possibility. So imagine that they're creating this with everyone. Everywhere these 4 entrepreneurs go, people have this experience of being less than.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine everyone is doing the same thing you're doing, trying to like scramble up so that they get purchase and then can then be back on the same level with these people.
There's something else that came up for me. Can I share that?
Of course.
Yeah. So some very powerful feedback I got from a mentor coach some time back was when she said, what if what you were feeling was simply a reflection of what your client was feeling? And just getting present to that, maybe what I felt the other day was not what I felt, but I may have been reflecting what they felt. And if I'm creating this high, like this ranking, I could be making them feel diminished.
Yes. And
And to what you said, yeah, I mean, I never thought of it. How would it be? I mean, for them to get present to the impact they have. I mean, not the impact they have, but just being more empathetic to how people feel around them.
so the risk here that I'm present to is that you're the part of you that's trying to like feel better about this, that like doesn't want to be in the discomfort, is that it's like, oh, maybe it's their stuff and I don't have to worry about feeling diminished. I'm going to assert it's both. So your
Yeah,
stuff is here,
sure.
because you've got that hierarchy and it's their stuff. And what I want to invite you to take a look at is like, imagine you're the only person in the world willing to just share this dynamic. So imagine you're the only person in the world that's willing to be like, wow, I feel really like small relative to you guys. What do you see that might make available for them?
Yeah, it's the same way you've given me perspectives I never had. It'll be perspective they may never have. They may never have had.
So they might have a perspective, a new perspective.
Yeah, it just
Can
makes
you
them present
anything more
to.
specific than that?
I mean, as if somebody came and told me if I'm impacting people like this, I'll go, wow, I never thought of that, and be more conscious of it, and make it a point to see that people don't feel that way in my presence.
Right. Yeah. So just imagine everyone in the world is doing exactly what you're doing with these people, trying to like scrabble up for purchase so that they're on the same level. that's going to be exhausting. And you're doing the same thing, not from wrong, just like, oh, that's the dynamic that exists. Do you think that there might be a benefit to them breaking that up?
Sure.
Would it possibly allow them to earn more money or have a bigger impact in the world or anything along those lines?
Yeah, it just makes being very present to, I think it was Ken
Are you going to answer my
Blanchard.
question here?
Yeah,
Okay, good.
sorry.
You're fine.
I'm doing it again. Okay. No, but I just love this quote. It's like these powerful people don't think less of themselves. They just think less about themselves.
Okay. How does that relate to the question I asked you?
No, so in the sense is like these are very, I mean, in the sense is when, in fact, some of the most powerful people I've met, they have always, one thing that stands out is how comfortable they made me feel, how humble they've been, and what a joy it's been to be in their presence.
Do you remember the question I asked you?
Sorry, can you?
Totally.
I'm going to blame it on the time, but I wasn't present. It's not the time.
Yeah.
I'm wide awake.
And you have a bit of a brain that, like, again, right? It's like, oh, 3 steps further, like, oh, meaning, then meaning, then meaning. And then it's like, oh, where? So all I'm asking you is, can you imagine if people got present to that impact? Like, oh, wow, people are trying to scrabble up for purchase to be on the same level with me.
Mm.
If you just acknowledge that over here, you didn't make it mean anything to them, but they just got to be with someone who is able to say like, oh, wow, I notice I'm really trying to scrabble up for purchase to be on the same level as you. And they got from that to start to see like, wow, I didn't realize that that's happening everywhere. They just got the opportunity to see that. Do you think that might impact their ability to impact the world and the amount of income they might make?
Sure.
Great.
I mean,
We
this
got
thing
there.
about, this thing, it's about empowering their team because, like you said, if everybody's scrambling to get that extra purchase just to be around them or to prove something to them or to be an equal to them, it's draining. It's not empowering. It's very disempowering. And to have a team, to be surrounded by people like that, to have a culture like that, that doesn't fit my version of an ideal client.
So what do you think there might be for you to practice with all of this?
I mean, first thing is managing myself here because I do not have to compensate. I do not have to be, I mean, this is where what I've got through this is that awareness of how I compensate. For me, to use Ken Blanchard's quote was another demonstration of how I use knowledge to kind of show how smart I am. So I'm present to that.
So what do you think
And
there might be to practice?
yeah, so what is there to practice in this is just be in the moment. I mean, this thing about when I know what my automatics are is being present. I mean, it's first a self-awareness. Now I know I tend to do this. How do I manage it in the moment? So that's going to
Okay.
take practice. When I know it's going to show up,
So
is
what would
kind
help you
of
doing that?
post-it notes before I get into a meeting. I mean, in the sense is just basically just go out there. Just go out there with a quote like "Be yourself," and that's it.
Well, may I support you a little bit? And
Yeah,
so like I really believe, first of all, the water we swim in is hard to see, and it's harder to see when we're like up against our fear. So like when I'm swimming away from a shark, it's hard for me to be like, oh yeah, water, right? I'm less likely. And in the face of that, the more pointed our practice is, like the more specific it is, the better it is, because it just cuts through a lot of the fuzz and the chaff and makes what is hard to see at the best of times a little more specific and easy. So I noticed, like you said, post-it notes, but a lot of that to me felt kind of vague. So how aware of how aware of this in the moment are you? Like, do you be like, oh, I'm doing it right now, here it is, or is it more like you see it after the fact?
I would say it's half enough. But again,
Okay.
it's a guess. How, I mean, it's on the days when my well-being is taken care of. I've meditated, I've done my yoga. It's much better. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, I'm tired, then I'm more likely to succumb to the like automatics.
Great. So it sounds like one practice for you might be simply noticing this more.
Hmm.
Is that, would you
Yeah.
agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Is that something to put on a post-it note? Like, is that the sort of thing you're thinking about putting there, or is there something
Yeah.
different?
No, that's it. I mean, in a sense, it's like just. I mean, it's like this, right? I mean, like just a sign saying that there are dogs in this. I mean, like this, like there are dogs out here. It's the same thing. I know that this is going to happen,
Yeah.
so
Notice red
just be
cars.
aware. Yeah,
Okay, great. So what are you going to be noticing showing up for you?
I'm going to see if I am what I said. If I'm doing the peacock dance.
Great. I love it. And I love that you've got a name for it. So notice the peacock dance.
Yeah,
Um, I'll let you write that part down.
yeah.
And what do you see you might practice when you do catch it? So if all you did was notice this, awesome. And if you wanted to go a step further, what do you think might support you in practicing when you do catch this happening?
Just pause, take a few deep breaths. Just do a quick mindfulness, like feel my fingers, awareness of breath, just something to get grounded in the body. Like get out of my
Okay.
head and get grounded in the body.
Okay. And did I hear that sort of part of what you wanted to create with these people was more connection in the moment?
Yeah.
So how could you practice that when you notice this showing up?
I don't want to say it because I don't want to be vulnerable on this call, but I will be vulnerable and I'll be open to even sharing what's going on for me.
Got it. Yeah. And, like no one's going to force you to do this, right? But even in putting a name to the thing, then allows it to be a little more clear in the moment. You don't have to choose it. So what I heard you say was like, when I catch this, I might even just share it. Oh, wow. I'm trying to do my peacock dance for you guys right now. I just caught that. How was
Yeah.
this for you? Did you like my peacock feathers? Okay, great. How do those practices feel? Do they feel like they'll create possibly something different for you?
I think it's good because at the end of the day, it's you lead by example. And by me sharing what's going on for me will provide the space, whether they take it or not. But it does give them an open invitation to do the same. And that's creating connection. I mean,
Uh-huh.
by just letting yourself be seen, you let others be seen. So, yeah,
Yeah, you create the clearing
yeah,
for seeing. I've got two other practices for you if you'd like them.
sure.
So the first one is I would invite you to notice be in the practice of like, what's my experience in the moment versus all that other stuff. So you might set an alarm on your phone every 30 minutes, every hour, every 4 hours, just with the question like, what is my current experience? And you don't have to make that like all you're really doing is separating like all of your brain from like the experience and the present felt experience, just so you can take that on as a practice and start to deepen that muscle to discern it.
Hmm.
Because in a lot of ways, that's the gift you have for people, right? Like I asked you about your experience. And when I noticed like you were struggling a little bit to sort of distinguish that, I just shared, oh, here's my experience. And I could make it really meaningful, right? Like, oh, that I'm scared that people are watching and that I'm scared that we're doing the wrong thing and that I'm annoying Manoj. I could create that as meaningful and then try to like not let it exist. Or instead, I can just share it like a gift and let it go. Oh, that's all there for me. I'm not going to let it dictate what happens next, but it's there.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is a book I think you might really appreciate and enjoy, and I'm not sure if you read it, is Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni. Have you read that?
Yeah.
Might be worth
It's on my
rereading.
shelf. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you read it or is it just on your shelf?
No, I have read it and I've listened to it, but it's been
Oh,
a while.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So reading it through like on the heels of this conversation might provide you a lot because really that whole book is about what we've been talking about, which is
Got it.
like showing up and hey, I don't know. And And that's my strength for you. In a lot of ways, that's my gift to my clients is sometimes they're like, Adam, who the hell are you to tell me what to do? What I need is a team of CEOs. And on the one hand, I'm like, that's fine if that's what you want. But if you'd like, I can answer that question for you and tell you what I can bring, which is I don't have your stories about the world. When you tell me, Adam, you know how it is, it's got to be this way, I'm going to go, why? And I'm going to ask you questions like a child would that are going to invite you to explore your assumptions rather than propagate the assumptions you have with you in collusion. And that's part of like our greatest gift for people is like the willingness to just like, wow, I feel dumb right now. Are you clear on
Yeah.
where we're going? No? Okay, good. What should we do? For the record, I felt dumb many times in this conversation. You are a very brilliant man, Manoj. So I want to finish by acknowledging you, and then we'll do a bit of a debrief. For everyone watching, anything you noticed show up in this conversation, it would be awesome if you'd share it in the comments, just so that we've got something a little juicy to talk about. And it's fine if you don't want to do that, or if you're like, I noticed nothing. I had this on while I was washing dishes, and my blender is hard to clean. That's what I noticed. Great. Before we go to acknowledging you, anything left for you, Manoj, to have this conversation feel complete?
I am more than complete for now. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I just want to acknowledge you again is your intellect, your brilliance. It's super present for me, and so one of the things I really love is working in partnership like this with really brilliant people, because it's so easy for me to get into the morass, the brilliant maze of thoughts, and this leads to that, and like one of the things I love about it is how sticky it is for me. Like it's really compelling, and I could probably figure that stuff out with you better than most people. And it's like, oh, that's my work, is to keep stepping out and being willing not to try to make sense of it, but to like honestly own that it doesn't make sense to me and then ask the dumb question. So I really acknowledge you, one, for the brilliance, two, for the gift it is for me and the inspiration it is and the call forward it is for me to get to be with that. I really get that you're a coach committed to the deeper path, as opposed to like the path of just giving people tools and stuff like that. And I get that there's a part of you that's like, well, you don't know, Adam, because I really like to give people tools, and that's great too. But I can tell that we wouldn't be having these kind of conversations. You wouldn't be working with an ontological coach if you didn't want to also create some more foundational shift beyond just helping people better move past the obstacles that keep showing up in their life. And third, Manoj, I acknowledge you for your playful wit. It shows up only a little bit in this conversation, but like I can see it on your face, I can feel it in your heart, and I'm present to it in your soul. And there's like I imagine a cheekiness to the way you can show up, and from a willingness to look dumb, our wit can be like, I guess it's the archetype of the fool, right? Like the fool can get away with saying stuff that no one else in the village can say. And when people that are really brilliant are willing to be in the experience of feeling a little dumb and can bring some playfulness, holy crap, those people change the world. So I'm not calling you a fool. I'm just acknowledging you that you
Yeah.
possess, much like I do, you and I share this, like that same gift. And I really honor that in you as coach. It's just like a beautiful thing to bring to people.
Thanks.
Yeah. So let's shift to a bit of a debrief. Like anything that's present for you in this moment where you're like, oh, I noticed this, or this was my experience, or anything along those lines to share.
Yeah, so for me, what I like about conversations like this, and I have to acknowledge you for how great a coach you are in being able to do this. It's a typical conversation when I get into a call with a coach. I'm spinning because that's how reality occurs for me. That's how much I live in my head. And that's why mindfulness and yoga really helps me because it helps me get more grounded in the body.
Yeah.
So for me, what I feel that were moments in this session were on how you challenged me on the lack of clarity of what a bigger game would look like. So there, that was very uncomfortable space because obviously I haven't given it too much thought, and the reason I haven't given it too much thought because it's scary. So then again, you ask me, should we work on this or should we work on that? And then when we started talking about, I don't know, then somehow I got lost out there. But what I'm very present to was that the feeling you left me with, because in the process of you not letting me off the hook, this cloud, this heaviness that I feel in my head, that lifted. And when that lifts, hey, this is simple stuff. It's the next step and the next step and the next step. So when I'm in this frame of mind, it's very easy for me to take the action. But
Yeah.
what happens is when I'm in that fog, I unnecessarily procrastinate, complicate, like you said, 3, 4 steps. I'll be looking at, I mean, Christopher said, I'll sign you on. The condition is no new courses because my not good enough has me to the next seminar and the next program. So yeah, I mean, now also I was just looking at what is the next program I can get started on tomorrow. So yeah,
Yes.
that's there all the time. So what I got from this was when the cloud lifted, there's clarity, there's peace, and there's no anxiety. There's no, I have to rush somewhere or I'm running out of time. There's just being in the moment and what the next step is. So that
Yeah.
lightness is priceless. It's a bit unfortunate. It's 2:35 in the morning. I hope that lightness is there when I wake up in the morning. But it would have been great to start the day with this lightness.
Yeah. I love what you said about anxiety. I really believe anxiety is kind of the brilliant person's way of addressing fear. Is it's like trying to solve fear in the future. So if I think about it enough, I can come up with some kind of solution to a fear that has not yet manifested, which is what it achieves is it puts us up into our head and then we're not in the felt experience of our fear. So it's kind of like it puts our fear on pause, or
Mm,
it's like a painkiller for it. But like any painkiller, then you require a greater and greater dose to manage the same amount of pain. And because you're not actually moving the fear through your body, because you're not willing to feel it, it increases too. And so it just spirals out of control. And so I really find, I find the same thing you do when I'm willing to be in my felt experience, especially when it's fear, because I don't like that. But when I'm willing to be with that and just like, okay, what it seems like there is for me to do right now is feel and be afraid, that tends to move through my body. And then it becomes really easy, doesn't it? Right. Because it's just
mm,
like, well, what's here for me now? Great. And then now, and then now, and what now? And we can let go of all of the managing the future. Doesn't mean we don't plan stuff out, but you and I are reliable for that. We've got the next 20 years planned
yeah.
out, give or take. I was really present to um, the, well, Mia says, I notice how hard it is to coach and to be coached. And I really, I'm really present to that myself and present to every quality of being, every way of being is challenging in its own way. I'm really present to the challenge of brilliance, the challenge that brilliant people face, the challenge of working with brilliance, and the challenge of allowing ourselves to be coached as brilliance because we want to help and we can see so much. And it's just like someone cutting my hair and I'm like holding the hair for them to try to be helpful and getting nicked by the scissors. And from that, what I'm really present to is how hard it is, how challenging it is to surrender and to like trust a process,
Mm,
not from any reason other than that even our desire to support and help can become a hindrance. And there is, at least for me, safety in helping people because then I still get to have my finger on the levers a little bit. Um, Mia says you guys are my brothers. He thanks Mia. Appreciate having you with us. Mia's also very brilliant. And Leo says a beautiful coaching session on both sides. Mastery displayed by Adam, vulnerability and courage from Manoj. Thank you, Leo. It's great to have you with us. There was one other thing I was gonna. Oh yes, the other thing I'm present to is the importance of creating practices at the end, especially with a conversation like this where it's really easy for us to kind of I guess a little bit pin you down, right? Get you to a specific place. But then it's kind of like not wanting to do the last 3 reps at the gym. Like we've done some hard ontological work here. You and
mm,
I have been worked, is how I feel. And it'd be so easy to just be like, oh, okay, great, we did it. Good session. And what I was present to is like, man, if we don't get clear on some actions, this is all just going to get wrapped back up into the thing. And so really pushing all the way to the very end of the finish line rather than like, you know, patting ourselves on the back. It was good enough and letting it stop there. Okay. It's 2:35 in the morning for you, so we're going to end this pretty quick. I want to say to everyone watching, thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Mia, Leo. Thank you. Who else do we have here? Bernie, thanks for showing up and saying hi. Robin, thanks for being with us, and a whole host of people that stopped in just to say hi. If you're listening on the podcast or in replay and you'd like to take the courageous step to be in these conversations, you can email me at adam@adamquiney.com. And Manoj, you're a coach on your side of the world and do work in leadership and stuff like this. If people saw something for themselves in how you showed up or just want to be in relationship with you, how do they do that?
Well, they can reach out to me at connectedbusinesscoaching.com, and it's got my contact details, so it's all out there. And yeah, we can take it from there.
Cool. And you're on Facebook too, right?
I'm on Facebook too. Yeah.
Great. So connectedbusinesscoaching.com. I think that's where we're going to call it a day. So thanks, everyone. Take care. Thanks for tuning in.